a few years ago when I heard him speak at a conference, and it was one of the most incredible speeches that day, if not the best one. Uh, and for for a long time, I didn't remember what his name was. Uh, and then I kept looking, and luckily one day the name turned up in that in Indica's the 1 month effort which Indica was doing last year. So he was one of the presenters. So that's when I got to know of him. So once he comes back, I'll I'll start. We can just do his bio till the time he comes back. It might be easier, uh, and I'll repeat a few things about him. Um, so he has trained under three teachers, two of them who are very dear to me. One of them is Jaddu Krishnamurti, and the other is Krishnamacharya ji, T. Krishnamacharya. And that's the lineage that I belong to in my yoga practice. And also Pulin Garg ji. Uh, and it was only in he was in his 20s when he spent uh, quite a significant amount of time with them. Uh, and he's been teaching ever since. But before that, he did his master's in biomedical engineering from IIT Chennai, IIT Madras, um, and he's been involved. He's been the co-founder of Sumedha, which I do know, and that started back in '95. Raghuji, I'm just giving you a brief introduction, so I thought I'll just consume some, or I'll save some juice.
Okay.
Uh, and I was just talking about the Sumedhas, and also that your work is rooted in the Yoga Sutras and the embodied exploration of the Mahabharata, which is what I heard last time. Um, and there are various offerings of Ritambhara. So without taking much time away, I'll just yield to you. Earlier we were asking questions uh, about how things have been in terms of the pandemic, and how you've been managing your day to day. Uh, are you? Yeah, is the computer stuck? Huh. So I'll let you take the stage and continue directly. That might be the best. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Mm, these are pretty difficult times where we're meeting, and I've just come out of a condolence meeting for a very dear friend of mine whom I've known for a very long time. We've done a lot of work together. Uh, so let me try my best to see what I can offer you people. Yeah. It'll help me if there are some questions and things like that, so that I can gather myself together and gather my thoughts together.
Why don't I start with a
Yeah,
question, right?
do that. Do that, please.
And I'll start from the Mahabharata. It's one of my favorite. You talk about your friend. I'm really really sorry, and I also want to thank you. Despite all that, you've come by here. Um, and I was thinking of Karna. That's the character that came to my mind. Uh, as a friend, he was always there, and and you as a friend, what was your friend's name, sir? If you can talk about them, and I think we would love to hear about him also, uh, as you spend your time with us.
Ah, um, yeah. He was Debjit Sarangi, that's his name, and he's done phenomenal work in Orissa on rebuilding tribal communities, helping the Gonds in particular. And there's an organization that he created called the Living Farms. And it's done some of the most pioneering work that I know of in bringing back not just dignity to the tribals, but also to highlight the depth of their knowledge and their understanding. Um, he had set up a whole way of looking at the forests as the source of uncultivated food. And I think some of the work he's done is extremely important. And I've known him from the time he started his whole journey as a young activist in the field and so on. So I've been with him, both me and my wife, we've been with him right through the process of his growth. And so it's a very deep loss because, people like this who have really anchored something extremely meaningful is what makes one's own life meaningful. Na? And knowing that such a person exists is itself a source of inspiration. So one of the things that some of us who've been with him have to now figure out is, how do we take this forward? How do we take his work forward? And there are lots of dreams that he had. Yeah, and the interesting thing is, or whatever, I'm starting a program this evening on the Yoga Sutra, and he was one of the first people to register for it. Yeah, so that's the reality. And so how have I coped with it? That might be interesting to share. What I've done is fall back on a core idea of yoga. That's the whole thing I was doing from yesterday, this morning, and so on. This idea is that we are all interconnected at a very deep level. At a pranic level, we are deeply interconnected. And especially when somebody like Devjit becomes an integral part of your life, it's very difficult to separate one's own pranic flow from that of the other. And in any interaction like this, there is a lot that gets seeded in me. There's a lot that gets triggered in me. There's a lot that gets evoked in me simply because of the depth of connection that we've had. So on the one hand, there is a certain vacuum in that pranic field. And on the other hand, it is for me to energize whatever seeds he's left in me, to energize whatever evocation he's left in me. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and that's the way I'm bringing my yogic practice over the years to bear at the present moment. And this might be something important for all of us to look at this point of time, because there have been lots of losses for many of us My brother went through COVID last week. He recovered. My daughter went through it the last time around, and her family, they recovered. So it's been kind of up and down, in and out kind of a thing. So that's where uh, I am, and that's the practice of yoga that I can bring forward and share with you at this point.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Gopal.
Thank you for talking about him. And
Raghu, my question, sorry,
Yeah,
Nidhi.
please, Gopal.
Raghu, it's great. Gurudeva Bhava, namaste. And it's great meeting you after decades. But I just talked to Damodar in USA and both of us pray our regards to you. Uh, what I was asking is, you have seen many people going through grief. Many of us have gone through losses, and you did talk about Devjit. When we all get affected either directly or indirectly, like you went through, our mind goes everywhere.
Yeah,
It goes to the relative, brother-in-law who is not well, the sister who just, or like that, your daughter or relatives or friends. So mind goes all over. So it's difficult to concentrate. And all of us are not yogis. We are all karma yogis. If at all, if you can qualify, we are in our action. So how do we still continue to focus on what we need to do? I'll not say detached attachment. How do we acknowledge that reality and still go ahead with our own life journey? That's a huge challenge we are facing last 1 year plus.
yeah, yeah. See, let me just share with you what I've been doing, Gopal. Yeah. There are two things that I've been working on. Yeah. One is uh, I've been having conversations with death and trying to, through these conversations, have a deeper understanding of what death means. Yeah. And it is difficult uh, because there are lots of myths, there are lots of things that you're told about what is death and this and that. Yeah. So one of the things that I've been working on is to, see what does it mean for me to let go of things. Yeah. So one of the meanings that I've given to myself to this idea of death, which is drawn from the yogic tradition, is that it's fundamentally a process of letting go. And when one learns how to let go, then when the time comes for the prakriti, the material part of me, to separate from the consciousness part of me, there is no struggle. So one can let go, watch the process of letting go, accept the process of letting go completely, right? And in our tradition, nothing really dies, no? There's only a transition of form while the underlying consciousness remains the same. Yeah, so one of the practices which I've been trying, which is not difficult at all, is to just lie down in what is called Shavasana and really just let, go into what it is in my life that I'm enlivening, what is it that I'm engaging with, and consciously letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go, so till I can just rest completely with my breath and with just myself. Okay, initially it's difficult. There are fears that come up when you let go of things around you, and watching this fear has been extremely helpful. Yeah. And I don't know, I've been doing this practice for some time now, and It's helped me a great deal. Yeah. So I can then engage with life again. And when I engage with it again, life has become much more poignant and things around look beautiful. So for as long as I can engage with them, I'm going to engage with them with whatever intensity I have. And if it's gone, it's gone. So that's been my practice. One of the things that happens when you start this process of letting go is your breath starts getting disturbed. Yeah. So part of the practice is that when the breath is getting disturbed, watch it, get back into relaxed breath while keeping the thought alive, not running away from the fear of what it means to let go. Right? So you watch the process of the fear, you continue with the process of letting go, let the breath relax. And as you do this, you're able to stay with a very quiet breath, with a relaxed sense of self, while you also let go. Yeah, so that's been my practice. And it's not a, I mean, after doing it for a while, I'm saying it's not such a difficult practice. But this is one thing that I've been working on.
Thank you so much for that. Jasprit, if we can keep Raghuji only up there, I think it's better. Please don't change. There are a couple of questions in the chat that have come up. Uh, Asha, would you like to ask your question by unmuting
Yeah.
yourself?
I prefer that. I
Yeah,
prefer that, Nitesh.
yeah.
This medium itself is so
Oh, I know.
crazy, nah?
Yeah,
I I'd like people to come on and speak so that I can see who I'm speaking to. Yeah.
yeah. Asha, if you can speak, if you're in a place you can speak, please let us know. If not, I'll read your question. Uh, I think she's unable to. We can't hear her. So I'll read the
Yeah.
question.
Sure.
I'll be right in the front. I think people should be able to unmute themselves if they want. Yeah. What should be? So Asha's question is uh, our outlook on death. Part of which you already talked about, and she mentions that it's the most natural phenomena happening around us, and we seem to be avoiding it. Um, and how do you address death? And one of the ways that you mentioned is that you've been talking to death. And she says, should we talk about it in our lives, or just let it be that when it comes, we deal with it?
I don't believe in parking things because you sweep it under the carpet and it slowly starts to stink. These are not things that one can sweep under the carpet because it's there in front of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first time I had to really answer a question that somebody else asked me about death was when my son had a pet cat and the pet cat died. Yeah. And it was inside the house and it died. And one had to deal with, this whole thing of what is the reality of the life, what's the reality when the cat is gone. And all that me and my wife Sashi could do was to sit with him and be with him while he experienced the sadness of the loss and things like that. Yeah. One of the difficulties, I think, in dealing with this whole idea of death is the amount of mythology that is built on it, the amount of money that is made out of the fear of death. there's huge business that goes on in the fear of death, and that business is called religion. Yeah, my own sense is that um, I don't know what anthropologists, what are they called? Yeah, these guys who go back and try to figure out what was happening a long time ago. Yeah, I think in my mind, the first sign that you have so-called intelligent human beings is when you get burial sites. That's when you kind of say, yeah, there have been human beings here. So there's some association, I think, between generally what is called civilization and this whole realization of death, realization of life. And therefore, there have been myths, there have been ways in which one has tried to deal with death over a long period of time. So there are lots of things that are built around the idea of death. Yeah. And I think it's important for each of us to look at these and sift out saying, what is it that is built up through people's fear about death, right? What does death mean? Because death is not something strange. It's happening every day. Something is changing every day. Something is changing every moment. So when I start looking at these things, and if, like, for example, the way I'm looking at death right now is it's one more act of change, one more reality of change, right? So every change that I encounter is giving me a view into how I'm going to respond to these kind of changes, right? And the other thing that is extremely helpful is, I spend quite a bit of time studying yoga. I also spend time looking at Buddhist stuff. And for both yoga and for Buddhist learning, change is inherent. Yeah, they talk about anitya as a fundamental thing to look at. And most of us are holding on to the idea that reality as we experience it is nitya. So if I hold a reality as permanent when it's inherently impermanent, then death is going to be a scary thing. Whereas in my understanding, if I can look at the process of what is changing, if I can look at the process of change which is happening constantly from a certain calmness, then I'm dealing with death every day. I'm dealing with life as it unfolds every day. And the loss of, you know, uh, things around me is, yeah, it's painful. It's there is a vacuum. But I think there's a way of looking at the whole process, looking at one's own reaction and one's own responses to it from a space of calmness. Yeah, without denying the pain, without denying the loss.
Yeah. Thank you, Raghuji. Uh, Jairam, Jairaman Iyer, you had a question. Please. Yes, thank you. Come.
Namaskaram, namaste, Raghuji. I'm very sorry to hear about your loss. Um, but if you're able to share with us from a yogi standpoint, as you're dealing with these turmoil, loss, intense emotions, what exactly is going in your mind? And what do you do to step back from all that commotion? it's pretty clear just watching you. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I do see a fair amount of stress, and I'm curious, what do you do for yourself to not get too carried away with it? What what are some of the things that you try to do?
Let me just tell you a story, Jaraman, which to me is very meaningful at this point. No? The story is of a Buddhist monk. I've always found this an extremely interesting story. Right? This monk's son dies, and his people who are studying with him go up to him, go to see him, and they see that he's weeping. And then they ask, yeah, they find that he's weeping, right? So they ask him, why are you weeping? So he says, I'm weeping because my son has passed away. And then they stop and they ask him again, but why are you weeping? So he says, my son has passed away and I'm extremely sad. Yeah. So what assumptions are you making that one is not human if one starts engaging with the study and the practice of yoga? I think it only makes one much more deeply human. And things that stress me are not just, the death of my friend Devjit.
It's 11:30.
Yeah. What stresses me is a whole lot of things of the way we live. And what made Devjit precious to me was we were on the same journey together, asking questions about how people are living, what is happening to the earth because of the way we live, and all of this, right? And that is extremely stressful to watch the way we as human beings use resources, how we've brought upon ourselves this whole, COVID disaster. I don't think it's a big secret that COVID is, the product of biological warfare, research into biological warfare. You can call it whatever you want. But the process of creating more and more deadly viruses in the name of finding out cures for it is just doesn't make sense to me. Right? So I think the deeper issue is what is it that we as human beings are doing with our resources? We spend 25-30% of the GDP creating weapons of war and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a deep distress about all of this, right? But the question is also that, can I anchor myself in a space of calm and a space of balance while I'm engaging with this? So yes, I am deeply stressed. I'm deeply pained by the death of Devjit. But also there's a part of me that's very calm and looking at the whole thing, right? That's the reality.
As a quick follow-up, if I may,
Yeah, sure.
this aspect of the calmness is what I'm very interested in to hear from you, which is how do you remind yourself to go to that space?
See, I've been thinking about this, Jaraman, because this is not the first time this question has come up over the last couple of years. Yeah, especially since this COVID thing started. Nah? I think it's there are two parts to it. Nah? I think one is a cumulative practice. Yeah. So I've been practicing this for a long time. This process of speaking with death, for example, is not such a recent thing for me. One, it is part of the Upanishadic stories. It's part of the whole adventure of Nachiketas. So one of the practices in the yogic path is to try and really get into some of these great journeys. You don't read about it and say, very good, very good. The way to look at an Upanishad, for example, is to take those questions seriously and inquire into them yourself. Right? So you don't read Nachiketas and Kena Upanishad and say, nice, nice, very nice. You sit back and you say, okay, if I have to have a death, if I have to have a dialogue with Yama, what would my dialogue be? Right? And interestingly, this is not just in the Upanishad, it's part of the Buddhist tradition. It's part of many traditions to have this dialogue. Right? And the same way, working with yourself, working with the breath, working with this whole practice of how to look at reality from a space inside you, which is calm and balanced, I think is the essence of yoga. And I really think that all this talk that's going on about, Jivatma, Paramatma, and all of this is a complete escape from the fundamental reality of life. These are intellectual things that I don't think is really part of yoga. Because if you really look at this whole process, if you look at the Upanishads, if you look at the Yoga Sutras, if you look at what Shankaracharya said, everything, the first step is to develop a mind which is capable of looking at reality, not capable of talking about all kinds of things that you have not experienced. So life and death are part of everyday reality. And learning how to look at both of them is the practice. Not talking eloquently about a Paramatma, which you and I haven't seen at all. Right? All this talk about heaven and hell and Paramatma, I think it's like advertising for some underarm deodorant.
Jai Ramaji, does that help answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
There is there's another question that was there. Manaswini, are you around?
Yeah, I think I got the answer, but if you could explain once again, if you could, if you would like to, I just want to know, what does it mean to talk to death? And before you talk to that death, do you have to understand death? And what's that process? I mean, if you could guide us through.
Maybe I've dived into the deep end of the pond right away. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. See, there are two, three basic things in this. The idea of death or the understanding of death is not such a strange thing as people make it out to be. So if you look at Jungian archetypes and things like that, one of the archetypes that Jung talks about is death. Okay, which means that I have a sense in my mind. I may not be able to describe it in words and so on, but it means that I have a sense deep inside me of what this is all about. And I also have a sense of what it is in anthropomorphic terms. Right. So when you read a story, let's say, like, let's take Nachiketas, for example, right? It talks about Yama, and it gives you a description of Yama, right? And in our traditions, we have a description of Yama. We pray to Yama every now and again. Yeah, Yamaya Dharmarajaya Mritivye Chantakaya Cha, yeah, Vaivasvataya Kalaya Sarvabhutakshaya Cha, and so on. So you're relating Yama, you're giving it a form, you're relating the aspects of time to it. And look at it, no? The most honest thing on the earth is death. So he's a paragon of honesty. Yeah. So the first thing you do, if you are into this process, is to actually pray to Yama. You describe Yama in your mind and bring up in front of you the picture of Yama as you hold it in your mind. Right? And if you just look at the way, when you read the story, you have a picture of Yama in your mind, right? So use that picture to start with and have a dialogue with this person, literally, but do it in a closed room, because otherwise people will come and say, what are you doing? Yeah. And listen deeply. There's a part of you that's very intelligent, and that part of you will answer you. Right? That part of you is the archetype of death that is there, that can speak to you. Right? And you can ask, there's simple questions to ask, is this really important to do? And have a chat. Death will tell you, is it really important or not? And I wish Pfizer would do that, have that conversation. I wish so many people who are profiteering from death would have this dialogue honestly. The world will be a much better place. Yeah, it's not that difficult. Yeah, it's just that there's so much of fear created about it that we are simply afraid of nothing. Literally, this is nothing, and you are creating fear about nothing. Maybe because you're giving too much importance to things and something. Yeah, it's not difficult at all. Just try it. And if you really work with it, Manaswini, you'll come to understand what is precious about life. And I think in these difficult times, it's very important for each of us to say, what is precious for me in life? And can I really invest in it? Yeah, because if I don't do this, I'm listening to a lot of people because that's part of my work. And this whole idea of the guilt of survival is something I'm listening to over and over again when I talk to people. And when I'm listening to it carefully, what strikes me is the guilt of survival is because this person is not able to say, why is it important for me to live? Right? It is important to live. It is important to invest in things that are really meaningful. Right? And running after the next thing that the advertising wants you to do because the GDP will go up, I don't think is the reason for living. And I'm hoping that COVID will enable us to ask this question. Now, what is it really that we ought to be doing with the resources we have? What is it really that we're going to do with the life that we have? Are we going to build atom bombs with it? And, are we going to create one more level of misery with it? What are we going to do with it? And I'm not too sure too many people want to ask this question. They're already starting a war in Israel.
Manaswini, does that help?
It helped me, Manas. Thank
No,
you.
thank you. I think we'll try to add this to our practice. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question? You can unmute yourself or raise your hand. Okay, if no one has a question, that's
Now, Varsha has her hands up.
yeah, Varsha, please go ahead.
Yeah, Namaste Raghuji. So my question is, how does one deal with difficult emotions? It could be fear, it could be resentment, it could be hurt. So when these feelings come up, like you said, when we start the process of let go, these feelings do come up on the surface. They must have been hidden for all this while. So how do we reconcile with it? How do we come in terms with these difficult emotions?
Let me try and give you a, at this point of time, I can only give you an intellectual answer, Varsha. See, one of the most beautiful things I've read is from the Buddhist tradition. It says that if you really look deeply at any emotion without running away from it, you'll sooner or later come upon the diamond that lies hidden behind it. Okay, when I've worked with this idea, what it means is that ultimately all emotions are just a form of energy. Yeah. For example, in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about this. They say that if you really work with anger, you discover that there's deep concern and love that creates anger. Okay. And then when they say you look at envy, they say that what is behind envy is your own recognition that you can be that. And rather than invest in that seed of what you can be, you are ending up focusing on the outside. This is a very beautiful notion. This is a very beautiful idea. Yeah. So the promise that this idea gives you is that, yeah, this might seem a little scary in the beginning. All great adventures look scary in the beginning. But if you take those steps, right, at the end of it, what you're going to find is extremely beautiful. Right? And they also say one more thing, which I think is brilliant. No, I think this is from the Zen tradition. They say that when you have to climb to the top of the mountain to discover calmness and peace, you have to make sure that the first step you take on the mountain is also filled with calmness and peace. Find these extremely beautiful, beautiful notions. So look at it, it's your fear, no? You've lived with it for a long time. Just because you haven't looked at it, it is not going to be anything more dangerous than looking at it. The fear doesn't come from somewhere else, it comes from inside you. And the more you push it away, the more you're generating a secondary response to a primary reality. Your primary reality is fear. Why are you creating a secondary response to it? Not being afraid of fear, being afraid of pain. Pain is inside you, the fear is inside you. It's a reality, it's a part of you. So what can it do to you, yeah? If it hasn't done anything to you in 30, 40 years of your life, it's not going to do something suddenly because you start having a conversation with it. So there's a part of you which is larger than it. Na? If it was not, if there wasn't a part of you that's larger than this fear or this pain, you won't be alive. You won't be having this conversation with me. I really think that, you know, many of these things are not as difficult and as strange as it's made out to be, except that you've not been taught this for a long time. You know, the practices that were at one point of time part of growing up have all suddenly been made into something strange, into something decadent, you know, something belonging to the past, something belonging to ancient civilizations. Therefore, modernity, if I'm a modern human being, I have to look down upon everything that comes from my tradition. And my tradition teaches me how to speak with death. My tradition teaches me how to speak with pain. My tradition tells me, look at Duryodhana in the face, and you might find part of you in him. You look at him even more carefully, you'll find Bhima inside that Duryodhana. Embrace this fellow. That's what my tradition says. And I think many traditions say something similar. So we just have to embrace these teachings.
Varsha, does that help?
Yeah, definitely. It really helped me. I think it's just that it's a little uncomfortable because we have never ventured into it and we've always been pushing it away. But I think, yeah, every journey begins with a small step. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Sandhya had a question. Can we?
Yeah.
Can
Yes.
you put it?
Hi. Hi. Thank you so much. That was amazing. Two questions, if I may, but you can choose if you have time to say both. The way I see, if it's a pain of related to somebody that I'm connected with viscerally, that means, say, my own kids, my mother, my father, I feel the emotions more immediately and more lasting than I give that, than I do to somebody which is a bit more removed. Now, is that fair or not fair is not the point. The point is, I think the aim is to have equanimity, to have the same detachment or attention towards everything. Isn't that it? And second question is, yes, practice, but is that how you sustain your intent and mm, your what shall I say, your steadiness into this acceptance and this journey of observing and living in reality in real time?
Let me get back to your first question. Your first question is the immediacy of the pain and the distance of the pain and things like that. Yeah, it's a simple biological reality, no? And if you look at it from the yogic frame, people who are related to you are pranically much more intertwined, right? And so actually, you can't separate yourself. Yeah, this whole idea that I'm a separate individual, billiard ball individual, is a very, very deeply violent idea. It's a very stupid idea, and it is destroying the earth. Yeah, I'm not separate. Okay. And this is a fundamental reality of the yogic way of looking at things. This is from Sankhya, that the form that I have is 1/4 of reality. Okay, so if I go a little deeper, and if I don't get caught with Raghu as a separate person, right, I'm obviously so many parts of me I can recognize as similar to my family. There's no way I can separate out. So if I start going a little deeper and experiencing myself from slightly deeper spaces, right, all the separation and form goes away, right? I can't separate. I really, if I listen carefully to you, I can't separate my pain from your pain. It's just pain. It's only when I make my pain special that I have to beat you up if you create pain for me, or I have to weep if a dear one passes away and pain is caused. So if I just let go of this idea that I'm a billiard ball separate entity, and somehow I should not feel what is human, which is pain and loss, which is human, which has been happening for thousands and millions of years. So if I get away from all these feelings that I have a right not to feel pain and all this kind of stuff, yeah, which is the idea of the individual, let it go, you realize that as a human being, you and I are not different. Yeah. So I might be more chronically and actually intertwined with my family a little more than somebody else, and little more or less than somebody else. And if I don't make this belonging anything special, then I can experience the sorrow of mankind without saying I shouldn't experience the sorrow of anybody. I shouldn't experience the pain of anybody. My family should be perfect. I have to be living forever, and all these kinds of ideas, which are completely violent. That's the source of violence. Every bomb is created in the name of saying somehow my way of life is more important than Iraq's way of life or Pakistan's way of life or something like that. So I've got to, I have a right to throw bombs at them. So the death of a Pakistani or somebody else is something that is joyful. The death of my people is something sorrowful. What kind of idiotic idea is this? And it comes from assuming that I'm an individual, which I'm not. I'm fundamentally interconnected with everything at a very simple, visceral level, not at some philosophical level, not at some theoretical level, nothing. So if I just let myself experience things, then I can resonate with the sorrow of an Israeli or a Palestinian or whoever, what's happening. Problem is because I start off trying to insulate myself from all this. And I imagine, and that form of insulation of the self is reinforced in the way we are educated. It's reinforced in the way we are rewarded for who we are, and so on. And we call this whole thing education. And then we use our education to go into a Wuhan lab or one of the, I'm sure there are hundreds of labs in the US and everywhere in the world doing similar experimentation. So we use what is called education, go into one of these labs and start splicing viruses to make them dangerous weapons of war. Yeah, shall we stop with this, Nitesh?
Yes, Raghuji, may I just request you, we have been talking about Devajit Ji, and can you just do a short prayer for him so all of us can remember him? I just took a photo of him from the web. I can put that up as well if you want.
Okay.
Uh, and so many of us have lost our friends and family members, someone that we know, so we can all pray for all the lives.
Sure.
Just give me a second. I'll just put it up. I hope I have, I think Is that the correct?
Ah, yes, yes, that's the guy. Okay, I'll just chant what we normally chant at the end of any, service of this kind. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the chant simply, I think, reflects what I've been saying so far, now that everything is whole. That's what it does. Oh. Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Krishna Namaste. Thanks, Nitesh. Whether it helped other people or not, all these questions helped me a lot. So thank all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Immense amount of gratitude for you to just come here and be here despite all that's happening. And again, my and I'm sure the others, sincere condolences. But thank you for being there. It's people like you who are pillars. We've been listening to talks that we need one calm person in the boat, and you provide that calmness in the middle of the storm. And you're the eye of the storm, as you mentioned it. So thank you so much. We won't take any more of your time. Thank you so much for being here. So we'll just take a minute to gather our thoughts in quietness.